What's up, I'm Tommy. Today we are going to compare the Aputure 120T to the Godox SL60w. Now you've probably heard of Aputure as a name brand quality light maker, and you've probably never heard of Godox. I know that the Aputure is a tungsten light and this Godox is a daylight temperature light, but we're going to compare everything that we can, and we're going to balance the white and check how bright they are, see how hot they get, see what quality light output you get from both of these different things. The one key difference that I would know off the top is this light is $600 and this one is only $109. Let's get to comparing. Now they both have wireless remotes, which you can use to control the lights, the brightness, and turn them on and off remotely. You have to turn both the lights on before they will operate properly with the remotes. But this light, the name brand one, if you set it on the table, nothing happens. If you set the Godox remote on the table, it turns the light on. Now, if you just don't throw your remotes around, you're probably fine. But whatever they used in their light made it extra sensitive to touch. Point number one goes to Aputure for quality of materials. Now something I found interesting about the Godox is it doesn't, no matter what, whenever it's turned on and plugged in so it can receive signal from the remote, the fan will be blowing to cool it off. Now, it's a pretty faint blowing sound, but if you were in a sensitive studio environment where you needed to eliminate any sound like air conditioners or fans or computers, this would probably bother you. Now, it is pretty quiet to me and I can live with it, and it's really easy to process out white noise in post, but that's one thing you'll need to keep in mind with this light. Now this next point might be petty to some, but it's annoying to me. So on the Godox, you'll notice fairly secure. On the Aputure light, it's very loose and clicky. So if you're moving your light around for any reason, you're gonna get a lot of clicking sounds. Not on the Godox. That one is pretty solidly put together. Now we have another point for Godox, surprisingly. The Godox is a completely self-contained unit, meaning there's no extra power ballast or power brick. It's just one long power cord that is replaceable, and everything else is just contained within this one unit. As opposed to Aputure's unit, of course you've got the light, and then you have the separate power ballast, and an additional brick for the power ballast to plug into. Now it may not seem like much, but when you have a lot of different things to manage, having a lot of different pieces can be a detriment to trying to get your production set up. But an advantage to having separate components is heat management and thereby sound. Since Aputure has all the different units, all the power ballast and the power brick and the light all separated, it has a much easier time managing heat, letting the unit stay much quieter, and you don't have all these annoying fans like you have with the Godox that's blowing even though it's not turned on. And now let's talk about a matter of convenience with the remote and adjusting the power output. Let's turn on the Aputure 120T and using the power ballast, adjust it down to 56% output and turn it off with the remote. Turn it back on with the remote, still at 56. Adjust it with the remote fairly quickly up to 100. Turn it off. Turn it back on, still at 100. Now that may not seem like a difficult thing, but let's try that with the Godox. Let's turn it on, see where we're at. We're at 89% on the remote. If I adjust the power output on the back of the unit down to, say, 40%, and then I turn it off with the remote, and I turn it back on with the remote, we're back up to 89%. The unit and the remote never stay in sync, so if you want to adjust the power output, you have to either do it with the remote or with the unit itself, and remember which one you were using, because they don't stay in sync. Also, adjusting the power output with the remote is painfully slow. Adjusting the power output on the back of the Godox unit itself is a lot faster though. Another gripe about the Godox is using the remote you can only adjust the power output down to 25%. On the Aputure you can adjust it all the way down to 10% using the remote. On the Godox you can adjust the back of the unit and turn it all the way down to 10%. But again, the remote does not remember or see that, and if you try and go down again, it adjusts it right back up to 25%. And just to show you the difference of adjusting the power output with the remotes to the two different units, we're gonna race to 100%. Ready, go. Aputure's at 100%, Godox is at 40, 50, oh wait. 100%. I'm shooting this in Cineleg D with the GH5 after selecting custom white balance, targeting a gray card, and setting the white balance. Right now I'm using the Aputure 120T, and we are at 46% power and we are not diffused. I'm gonna turn it up to 100%. Pretty bright. And for a diffuser, I'll be using this insanely cheap Neewer Octo box because I didn't want to spend $150 on the Aputure crazy box, whatever they call it. This was like 25 bucks. And now I'm using the Aputure 120T with the softbox at 70% power. We're at f3.5, 1/60th of a second shutter speed, and ISO 200. This light has plenty of output to make a great key light, which is what I intend on using it for. Something I really enjoy about setting white balance to tungsten is it makes all your other lights look blue. It's Godox time, but I look like an Oompa Loompa, so I need to reset my white balance. Well, here we are in Godox territory, and the power level is set to 30%. And just off of my first impression, looking at this light directly in my face here, it looks significantly brighter. Let's see what it looks like up at 100%. Here we are. Pretty darn bright. And here we are with the Godox behind a softbox, and I must say, this light looks quite beautiful behind that softbox. Again, we're only at 33% power. Let's move it up, see what it looks like at 100. Here we are at 100% power, same settings as last time, ISO 200 f3.5 and 1/60th of a second for shutter speed. Now what's interesting is the Godox SL60w is a 60 watt light, while the Aputure 120T is a 120 watt light, so you should be getting more light output out of the Aputure 120. And again, of course, with the white balance selected for daylight, it does appear to make all the light orange from the tungsten. Now, adjusting white balance is a topic for a whole nother video in itself, and you can make a lot of different types of lighting situations just by adjusting your white balance and your lights. So, when you're buying lights, pay attention to the color temperature that they are. The Godox SL60w is a daylight type light with a color temperature of 5600 K. The Aputure 120T is a tungsten type light with a color temperature of 3000 K. Now something about the controls, the Aputure does have quite a bit more customizations and controls for working with different types of lights or different lights within the same system as the Godox, which only has 5 buttons. But it does have this handy little LCD screen that tells you what's happening with your light. Now I'm going to run both these lights at 100% and see how hot and how loud they get. So the Godox does have a little temperature gauge on it, and from what I've read, it will shut down if it gets too hot. Something you don't have to worry about with the Aputure. Update here, it's been about 6 minutes, and the Godox has stabilized at 45 degrees Celsius. Additionally, after 5 minutes of use at 100% power, the Aputure has gotten as loud as the Godox due to the fan inside in the main unit. So that point about Godox being loud all the time is kind of moot now if your videos take longer than 5 minutes to produce. Also, I wouldn't worry about the Godox shutting off because it gets too hot, because apparently it has to get up to 70 degrees Celsius before it'll shut off due to heat, and I can't get it to get any hotter than 45 degrees Celsius. So another note about the Godox, on the remote it says 4400K, which doesn't make any sense because that's a 5600K light. And you can't really change it. Let's talk about power options. The Aputure has a V-Log mount battery option built into the power ballast, so you can either power it with a power cord or with that battery. Godox, on the other hand, you can only power this particular unit with a power cord unless you buy the battery powered unit, which they have, and it's only a few more bucks. So the power options, as long as you plan ahead, are not a problem. And finally, which one should you buy? Well, if budget's not really a big issue and you need to buy several lights, I would say buy one aperture and fill the rest of your bags with Godox, because the Godox are just an incredible value. Even though the aperture has slightly better materials, it has slightly higher quality aesthetic. I mean, they just look a little bit nicer, and you can leave them turned on all the time without the fans always blowing, and so they can receive power from the remote all the time. I would still recommend the Godox. There's only tiny little inconveniences that equate to, I would say, maybe the difference of $100 in value. But for the price of one aperture, you can get 6 Godox lights. That is crazy. If I didn't answer any of the questions that you had about either of these lights, feel free to ask them in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Last thing I promise, this video wasn't sponsored by anybody and I used my own money to buy all of these lights. So if you are going to purchase one of these lights, please click over in the links that I provided in the description of this video, as they will help support my channel and it won't cost you anything extra. And right now on the way to my studio, I've got the Jinbei EF 150D, which is a 150 watt daylight temperature light from the largest manufacturer in China, and I'll be comparing it against these two. So if you want to see that comparison, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and have a great day.